Alright everyone, in disease news today that you heard from absolutely no corporate media outlet but need to know anyway, we have a new Ebola outbreak in Congo. Unfortunately, it's not the first Ebola outbreak there. The other one on the opposite side of the country is sort of winding down. They largely got control of it. Unfortunately, the new one, including many dozens of deaths, is near Kinshasa. And that's bad news. You see, when the virus gets into larger urban areas, it's much harder to snuff out. We saw this with Butembo and Beni and some of these other locations in the last outbreak, which I think killed something like 20,000 people. The West African outbreak a few years ago was terrible too, and that never managed to fully penetrate a fully urban setting. And we were very lucky because what happened is that virus had already mutated. It had become more transmissible. That's why it was spreading so quickly. People were freaking out at the time. You remember like Ebola-chan and Mask of the Red Death shitposting and stuff. The reason is mutation. Thankfully, that strain was mutation-prone enough that it mutated again at some point and became largely asymptomatic. What ended up happening is that the disease was spreading almost like an STD through some of these communities, immunizing people against the main strain. And so nature took care of it. The treatments that mankind deployed were only very limited in their usefulness. Unfortunately, the serums and so forth that were produced, they helped, but they didn't... I mean, when you reduce the death rate from 40% to 30%, that's better than nothing, but it's not that great. I believe they used tobacco plants, actually, to manufacture one of the serums that they were using, the one that was most effective. They're still trying to deploy vaccine. Unfortunately, when you have a major urban area in proximity to such an outbreak, with the possibility that it's a new mutant strain, like the West African outbreak years ago was, it's a recipe for disaster. I mean, the worst case scenario is that it hits a place like Lagos. The worst case scenario is that a place like Timbuktu, Lagos, Johannesburg, one of these other areas in Africa, ends up getting infected with a variant that spreads very quickly, and it spreads beyond the ability of an asymptomatic mutant to dumb it down. What you end up doing with a mutation-prone disease, the more people that are infected, the more viral generations, the more chance for an additional mutation. If it is capable of becoming more transmissible, or more or less deadly, or potentially jumping from one transmission mode mainly to another, which is very rare, thankfully. What can end up happening is a disaster scenario where a city of millions of people is overrun, falls into chaos, people flee, they bring the virus with them. We saw this historically with the Black Death. People began to try to flee the advancing virus only to catch it and take it to the next town. And people would have to hear sometimes weeks beforehand, hey, half of humanity's dying 100 miles from here and it's moving in this direction. Bring out your dead, fucking abandon ye all hope, and all of a sudden 30-40% of your town's population is gone. This could be a nightmarish scenario, and it's like people are so focused single-mindedly right now on coronavirus, which has a death rate of below 1% for most demographics, and it's not a doomsday plague. It's definitely mutation-prone. There's already potential treatments, but nothing particularly great. And it's not great when anyone dies of a disease. But it's not the same as Ebola. We don't know that it's mutation-prone. We've had how many millions of cases of coronavirus, and it seems to be genetically stable. We've had multiple mutations over the span of a few tens of thousands of cases before with Ebola. It's just a matter of time, by the way. It's a matter of time. Coronavirus doesn't really rise to the same level as something like Spanish flu, which initially was a worry that people had. That's why initially the lockdown made sense. For the first month, I supported the lockdown too. I said, okay, we need to pause things right now because this could get very bad and we need to know the nature of the demon we're dealing with. We didn't know how transmissible it was, what the death rate was going to be. We didn't know all of its vectors. We didn't know these things. Now that we do, you can open things back up and not worry too much. There are measures you can take like washing your hands more. The vulnerable should wear a mask. Stay home if you have symptoms. That makes sense. You should be doing that anyway with seasonal flu as well. And we've also got tests for it. With Ebola, we don't lack any understanding about the virus, but we do also know that it's capable of mutating. We know it because it did before. They proved that at least 2 mutations in the West African outbreak took place. This could already be a mutant translocated from the initial outbreak hundreds of miles to the east on the other side of Congo, which was bad enough. This one is close to a very large city of millions of people. If it takes hold there, and if it mutates, that's the virus that you're dealing with now isn't the problem. It's the virus that arrives tomorrow. If that happens, millions of people could die. Could be tens of millions. The more, again, the more cases, the more likelihood of an additional mutation. Maybe it goes airborne. If Ebola ever went full airborne, man, most of Africa would be wiped off the face of the earth. It would escape containment. It would end up worldwide. Remote areas already under lockdown from coronavirus might escape it, like Iceland maybe. New Zealand might be able to prevent it. Pretty much everywhere else in the world, though, would be fucked, and, something like a third to 40% of humanity could die. That'd be pretty drastic. And while 100 years later, you might end up in a mini renaissance, because, of course, then you've got lots of free fallow land, and you've got a younger population, a baby boom is up. That might be great for your great-grandchildren, but it would suck for everyone alive today, both young and old alike. Really suck. You wouldn't be getting your organic free trade coffee because there'd be no one willing to fucking grow it. Who's going to ship it around when people are dropping like flies on little plague ships? Not going to happen. That's about all. Peace out.